Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Miss Gordon. I'm here for you on today's assignment, which is all about our cardiac physical fitness, looking at our heart rate and how our heart rate can be an indicator of our overall health. So, this unit ties into our learning on homeostasis, thinking about how the body needs to remain in balance, that there's specific things that our body needs, so that we need to have those specific things like oxygen, like glucose, like waste levels, like temperature, all those things that need to remain constant in our bodies. One of those is a cardiac rhythm or a set heart rate that we can kind of maintain as a steady rate. Now, our heart rate will go above and below homeostasis depending on our activity. If we're exercising, for example, our heart rate might go up. If we're sleeping, for example, our heart rate might go down. So our essential question in this particular lab is, how fit is my cardiovascular system? And we're going to be using several different measures to identify the fitness of your heart rate based on 5 different scenarios. So for this lab, I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview about cardiac fitness, as well as why our body needs a consistent heart rate. Then we're going to talk about the procedures of the lab. And then if you have any other questions about this activity, you'll need to email me or make a comment on Google Classroom to get that answered. So during physical exertion, so when you are working out, let me move that, move that up. When you are working out, aka physical exertion, your cardiac rate increases. So your cardiac rate is measured as a beat per minute. You can feel your heart rate both on your carotid artery here in your neck, or you can take your radial pulse, which is on the outside of your wrist, right there. We're going to be looking at that in a little bit. But this increase that you see when you're exercising is measured as an increase in your pulse rate. And again, that's beats per 1 minute. So why do you think your heart rate increases in this situation? Why does your heart rate need to go up in times of physical exertion? Okay. Let's go back to this. So when you are working out, when you're being physical, think about what that requires. Your muscles, which are contracting and releasing with each movement, require energy for that contraction. Now, that energy that is used in our muscles is a form of energy called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And ATP is made by breaking apart the chemical bonds in glucose. In order to break apart those chemical bonds, oxygen must be introduced to that glucose, and a chemical reaction called cell respiration takes place. That reaction produces water and carbon dioxide as a result. You might be familiar with this equation, and it's something we'll look at again later. But our heart rate needs to increase because our cells are using up energy faster. So if our cells are using up the ATP faster, that means we need a more steady and frequent supply of glucose, which we break apart, and oxygen, which is used to break apart those chemical bonds. So why does your body, what does your body need during exercise? What part of your body needs it? And why does your body need it? Okay, during exercise, your body needs additional glucose and oxygen to your cells, every cell, but particularly the cells that are working, like your muscles. In addition to those needs of oxygen and glucose, remember, we also need to get rid of waste products produced through this process of energy creation. And that waste product for us is going to be CO2. And so we need to increase our cardiac rhythm so that we can get that CO2 to the lungs faster and more efficiently, so that that CO2 can exit our body. Now, to get oxygen to our muscles to be converted to energy, we need to take that oxygen from your lung site. So remember, at your lung site, there's these little bubbles called alveoli. Those alveoli are where gas diffuses in and out of the bloodstream. So oxygen needs to go into your lungs and into your alveoli, and then small capillaries at the ends of your bloodstream that meet up with your alveoli pick up those gases. So when we breathe in, oxygen goes in, our capillaries pick up that oxygen at the site of the alveoli and take it through our bloodstream to every cell in our body. And when we're working out, particularly cells that are using up ATP to create energy. Now, your heart in this process is the pump. And if you want to learn more about the heart, I so recommend taking a look at the anatomy of the heart. It's essentially 4 chambers, and there's a coordinated squeezing of those chambers to squeeze blood out and also to allow blood to enter the heart, both from the body and from the lungs. It's a cool process, one that I highly recommend you looking into. But once again, the heart is the pump. So the more efficient we have a pump, the more blood we can get to the places where it needs to go. And efficiency can be both on the strength of the pump, so how much force there is when it pumps, but also the size of the pump. So if your heart has bigger chambers, it can hold more blood and push more out. But most effectively is the strength of the contraction. And so when we work out, the strength of our heart actually increases, and those muscular walls of our heart increase as well. Now, cardiac rate is generally the same for people in the same age group. So if we're looking at adults in their mid-30s, if I'm comparing my cardiac rate average to someone else, even if that person was not physically fit or more fit than me, we're gonna have similar homeostatic cardio rate. We're also gonna have similar max cardio rates, which means that we both probably have a max around 160 beats per minute, regardless of our fitness. We can work out and reach a maximum of about 160 beats per minute. So I'm in moderate good shape. I wouldn't say I'm an elite athlete by any means. I'm also not a complete, person who does no exercise at all. I'm somewhere in the middle. And so even if you do no exercise at all, your max cardiac rate is still 160. Now the difference is it takes you, if you're sedentary and you don't do a lot of exercise, it takes you less work to get to that cardiac rate of 160. Whereas an elite athlete, someone who's got a very physically fit heart, they can work out harder and more before they reach that max heart rate. Okay. For people who exercise more, remember your heart and your respiratory muscles, they are muscles, which means they gain strength and can be trained. So if you are someone who is an exerciser, the muscles involved in respiration are stronger and more efficient. You have muscles in between your ribs called intercostal muscles that can strengthen to force your chest cavity closed or to expand it more. Your diaphragm is a muscle that you can train. Individuals who exercise more actually build and increase the number of capillaries, both in their lungs and in the muscles. And remember, capillaries take blood to individual cells. Think of it kind of like a blood network. And then finally, if you're thinking about individuals who exercise often, their heart changes a substantial amount. The heart walls can get stronger, more musculature, which gives more force when you're pushing blood in and out of the heart. People who work out have cells with more mitochondria and larger mitochondria. And the mitochondria, as you remember from middle school, is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's where cellular energy is produced. So more mitochondria, larger mitochondria is an effect of prolonged exercise and frequent exercise. All right, we already talked about this. So who do you think will have a slower increase in their heart rate during exercise? Physically fit people or people who are not fit or sedentary? We want to think about that as we enter our lab today. And who do you think will have your heart rate return to resting? So if we've resting heart rate at homeostasis and we leave it, what kind of person is going to be able to return to homeostasis faster? Someone who is fit or someone who is sedentary? That's a question to think about as well. Now, in this activity, we're going to use the simple measurement tool of taking our heart rate to determine how fit you are on a cardiovascular level. Now, what I'm going to do really quickly is show you how to complete this lab. I'm going to show you what portions of the lab are going to require some data, and then there's other pieces of the lab that are going to require some analysis. Okay. First of all, when you're taking your pulse, you're going to be either using your carotid pulse that's on your neck, or you're going to be using your radial pulse that's on your wrist. If you're holding your wrist out like this, bam, with your fingers pointed out. A radial pulse is where you kind of wrap your finger and your middle finger around your wrist and you hold it like this. This is the most effective way to get your radial pulse, by taking your fingers and wrapping around your wrist and grabbing that radial pulse. It's just right on the outside of your wrist, right before those tendons. I prefer to use radial pulse because I don't like pushing on my neck. Now, we can go ahead and practice taking our pulse now. If you're watching along with the video, what I'm going to do is set my stopwatch. And during that time, I'm going to time myself for 6 seconds. Okay, so I've got my stopwatch here. I'm going to time myself for 6 seconds. And then when my timer goes off, I'm going to stop counting my pulse. So I'm going to find my pulse. Okay, I'm looking at my carotid artery. I could also look at my wrist. I'm going to look at my carotid just because my other hand is going to be setting my timer. Okay, and I'm going to go for 6 seconds and count how many beats I have. So if you want to do that with me, go ahead and try that in 3, 2, hold on, not yet. Go ahead and try in 3, 2, 1. All right, there's my timer. Now, in that 6 seconds, I got 10 beats. Okay, so in that 6 seconds, I got 10 beats. Now, here's the thing. If I got 10 beats in 6 seconds, what that means is if I were to look at beats per minute, I actually have to multiply that by 10. So let's see if I can get my camera on here. There we go. All right, now you can see my writing. So in 6 seconds, I counted a pulse of 10 beats. Okay, so I was 10 beats for 6 seconds. Now the problem is I don't want to know my beats per 6 seconds. I want to know how many beats my heart will beat in 60 seconds. Okay, so I need to know how many beats in 60 seconds. So if you're solving algebraically, you could do this. Now, what I like to do is I know that there are 60 seconds in a minute. And so if I multiply 6 times 10, I get 60 seconds. If I multiply 10 times 10, I get 100 beats per minute. So my actual heart rate for 6 seconds is 100 beats per minute. Remember, I timed myself for 6 seconds and I got 10 beats. But I want to know how many beats are in 60 seconds. So I have to multiply both by 10 to get my beats per minute. I'm going to do this again and I'm going to do it a different way. Okay. Now, 6 seconds isn't the actual ideal amount of time to take your pulse. I would say the ideal amount of time is probably closer to 15 to 20 seconds. So let's try 15 seconds. Okay, so let's try timing ourselves for 15 seconds. I'm finding my pulse. And we're going to start right now. All right. Now, I got 16 beats in 15 seconds. Okay. Now, I don't care how many beats I have in 15 seconds. I want to know how many beats I have in 60 seconds. Okay. Now, to find this number here, how many beats were in 60 seconds, 15 seconds is a quarter of a minute. And so if I multiply 15 times 4, I get 60. So that means I need to take my 16 beats, I need to multiply this by 4 to get my beats per minute. Because I know that there's 4 times 15 is equal to 60. So if I go back to my calculator, 16 times 4 is 64 beats per minute. So that's a much more accurate way to measure your pulse. If you want to just hold your pulse and count your timer and just do a whole minute, you can do that too. Okay, you could just set a minute on your timer and take your pulse for a whole minute. That's a little bit, for me, a little too long because I feel like after like 30 seconds, I could lose count. So I think 15 seconds is kind of the sweet spot, and then multiply that pulse by 4 to get your heart rate per minute, beats per minute, okay? Now I'm gonna go ahead and minimize this for now, okay? And let's go to the activity, okay? What you see here is the cardiovascular fitness lab, the information sheet. You can reread this. A lot of it is what I just talked about in our slideshow. Okay. Now, what you're doing is you're filling out this data section on several different scenarios regarding your pulse. There's 5. You've got a standing pulse, so you're standing up for 2 minutes and then taking your pulse. A reclining pulse, you lay down and then you take your pulse. What's called a baroreceptor reflex, a step test, and a recovery rate. Now, if you want to know what those tests are, you're going to have to go to the slideshow that gives you an overview of those things. I put the links here under where it says fitness points. So if you click on this link, it's going to open the slideshow here. This slideshow shows you how to do each test. So for example, test 1. Let's go test 1. Test 1 is the standing test, standing pulse. So you're going to stand for 2 minutes without doing anything, and then take your pulse after 2 minutes. Remember, you'll need your phone or some kind of timer. Okay. Now, my sitting pulse was about 64 beats per minute on my last calculation. So you're going to not only take your pulse, but you're also going to use this chart to identify your fitness points. So if you had a pulse rate after standing for 2 minutes of about 60 to 70, you have 3 fitness points. If you have a pulse rate of about 81 to 90, then you have a fitness point of 2. So you're going to have to go back to that document that we were just at and type in your data, what were your beats per minute, and then your fitness points. Okay, you're going to do that for each scenario. So here's the next one. Oh. The next one is reclining pulse. So for this one, you're going to lay down for 5 minutes. Now you're not laying down and doing other things. You're just laying down. Do not get up. Time yourself laying down. Take your pulse laying down. Determine your fitness points. Copy it down into your data table. Then test 3. You're still laying down. And then for test 3, you're going to stand up and immediately take your pulse upon standing up. This is called your baroreceptor reflex. Now you're going to need to calculate the difference between your pulse upon standing and compare that to your pulse that you had when you were reclining. Okay, so then you're going to assign yourself fitness points. Then you're going to do the same thing for your step test. You're going to step up and down a stair 20 times, or you can just hop, then take your pulse immediately after the exercise. And then finally, your recovery rate, time it takes you to return to your standing pulse within the time frames listed below. So if you're looking to see what was your resting pulse and how many seconds does it take for you to return back to that pulse. Now, your goal is to get this data set done before next class. So once again, you are filling out these data points here before next class. If you have any questions about each of these tests, please don't hesitate to email me or comment on Google Classroom. All right, you guys, that's it. So I'm going to say goodbye, and I look forward to seeing you next time.